Welcome to video 3 in my commentary series. You'll see 3 clips in this video, with each of the clips dealing with progressively tougher opponents and closer matches than what has been featured in my previous videos, and my thoughts on the battles afterwards. Let's begin. As usual, I bring out my Gareth to start and check what my teammates have brought out also. I think the spawn location I've started at is slightly imbalanced here, as it tends to favour my team for the A, B and D beacons from the start. From here I usually always move to capture B and A and try to get an idea of what bots the enemy are using before deciding where to move next. After capturing B, I'm engaged on by a spiral user and successfully block his attack. However, I wrongly assume his attack was finished and looked the other way, and then turn back to notice Hydra's heading straight for me, but I still managed to block all but one of them. I try to capture A, but my teammate beats me to it and I'm engaged on again by the spiral bot. I angle my shield slightly to the right of where I predict the impact point to be to centralize the hit, as sometimes a missile can sneak through and hit your exposed weapon side if you just face them directly. I decide not to flank on the enemy spawn side due to their presence being strong and the attention I have from the spiral user will slow me down too much, so I move back to see what bots are being used by the enemy and to get a better idea of the front line. I also want to preserve the strength of my shield for the more important engagements. As I arrive at Beacon D, Tolumbus Griffin jumps in and I narrowly avoid his salvo. An unknown Orcan user then engages, but I move out of the way in time. They're both in hiding, but I decide not to charge forward as I'll be left too exposed to retaliation and attack from the other enemies out of my sight. I take the wide route where there is plenty of cover and move to finish the Griffin, who is now at critical health. My teammate does so instead, so I next focus on the enemy, still unaware of what exactly he's using. He reveals himself to be a Pinata Stalker and charges forward with stealth, so I begin backpedaling to avoid his salvo, but bump into a teammate, so I take one minor hit before the Stalker is melted by a friendly Trebuchet Fury. As I approach to retake D, I notice a Trident Fury at their spawn, as does my teammate, so we both use the central power plant as cover while we take the objective. The enemy presence is too strong ahead of me, so I scout to the other side to get a better look at the enemy force. I assume the Carnage I'm locked onto to be using Tridents, so I cautiously approach the side in anticipation of his attack. A Plasma Griffin jumps over to meet me, and my angle is safe enough to pop out and have a little chip at his health. At this time I'm very careful not to expose myself for more than a second in case of splash damage I don't notice or mistake for friendly fire in the heat of battle. I'm unable to finish the enemy and use their distraction as a chance to get around to the other side and begin hassling the Trident Fury, as we all know just how deadly and game-changing they can be. I see he's just fired, so I move into attack range and to cover where I can assist my teammate and backstab the previous enemies whilst being safe from the Trident Fury's fire. I take some retaliation from a Thunder Leo, but he goes down eventually. I then turn my attention back to the Fury, who should be aware that if he fires again then I will come out to shoot him. I try to bait his attack, but he doesn't take it, leaving us both in a situation of suppressing each other just by sheer presence. Another Plasma Griffin appears over the hill and has me in his sights. I keep track of him, but my priority is still the Fury, and I'm waiting for him to fire so I can come out to attack. The Griffin is slowly approaching my flank, but I make the incorrect assumption that my teammates will have an angle on him and prevent him from coming around the corner, so I turn my attention back to the Fury, waiting for my chance to attack. I end up getting surprised by the Griffin and forced into engagement. My teammate assists, but the Griffin is able to destroy my shield and me before he quickly goes down also. I now bring in my Gecko Leo to get some pressure into the Fury from a distance in hopes of destroying him, and then marching the Leo to Beacon C as an expendable distraction for the enemy. As I attack, the Fury doesn't really seem interested in survival, and so just accepts what I'm doing until I destroy him. The enemy are thinly spread out and seem to be lacking any kind of coordination, so I begin firing on anyone I can to get their attention. As I get closer to C, I assume the Rhino to my right is coming to intercept my capture attempt, but instead is more interested in destroying my Fury using teammate. I guess he shares an equal vendetta towards the Fury users as I do. I'm now looking around for people to shoot, but no one is within sight. The enemy at their spawn seems to be absent, so I leave him alone and turn back to see if the Rhino can be engaged on yet. He's now able to be attacked, so I open fire, but he gets behind cover, prompting me to look for a new target. Looking back to the Rhino, I see he's damaged but successful in his revenge, and he's coming to meet me next, but the game ends with a strong win for my team. When using the Gareth, it's tempting to run around with a feeling of relative safety due to the protection of the shield. But the shield should still be treated with concern as if it were a part of your health pool also. Not wasting the integrity of your shield on meaningless blocks means you have higher survivability for the fights that can really make a difference to the match. The next clip will take us back to the canyon map, and I know I've featured this in all of my videos so far, but it just so happens I get placed in this map a lot. For the future videos, I will make sure to add the others. One thing I've neglected to mention so far in previous videos is how the spawn camera can sometimes be used to see what bots the enemy are using right before the game begins. This of course is heavily dependent on the map and the spawn location though, and sometimes it just isn't possible. As always, we begin with checking the opposition's bots, weapons and movements to determine the course of action. At first glance, I see a Thundervidias and Plasma Gareth who I thought were going to Beacon B, but instead head for the central Beacon C. Behind them is a Tulumbus Griffin that seems to be becoming more and more common lately, so I need to stay aware of him when possible. I use their battle in the center to head for Beacon B and gain the early advantage. A Hydrofusion at the back sees me and opens fire. I manage to block all but one of his missiles, and seeing the damage of one missile allows me to know the rough level of his Hydras, meaning my shield absorbed around 20,000 damage. I try to keep track of this for future engagements to know when my shield might be close to breaking. After taking a beacon, I want to attack the Hydra, but unluckily for me the enemy that spawns in next to him is a spiral user that I'm forced to block, and then decide the pressure from them both is too great and begin to retreat, angling my shield to block any more incoming fire. At this stage I'm assuming around 50,000 damage done to my shield of a total 130,000. I note Beacon D being overtaken and move in to assist on the defense, as losing that ground will trap us back in our spawn and potentially lose us the match. As I approach, I try to keep my shield angled towards the previous enemies in case they're still tracking me, and begin damage pressure on the Vitiers and Rhino, forcing them behind cover. My precautions about being tracked were justified as I block a spiral hit from my flank before engaging the attackers directly. A quick golem fires on me from the back, but my shield protects me once more. The Rhino and Vitiers then fall from my team's combined pressure. I move into retake C and predict my shield has taken around 60,000 damage at this point, so I know the exposure whilst taking back the beacon may likely get me destroyed if the enemies engage on me, but the importance of the beacon takes priority. The enemies do indeed engage on me, and I take some bullet wind, plus a huge cluster of spiral missiles, which combined are enough to take out my shield. A Tulumbus Griffin also engages, but I move out of his attack range in time. As I retook D, the enemy claimed back the center beacon, and my team still remain at a disadvantage. With my shield destroyed, the only thing I can think to do now is head to Beacon C and harass the enemy until destruction. The spiral bot re-engages on me, and seeing their flight angle, I try to use the large rock to block them, but I fail in doing so. I need to get to the center as quickly as I can now before I'm pressured down by the missiles. I used a small rock for light cover as I approach and begin opening fire on anyone in range to distract and soften their health. A Tulumbus Griffin is ahead of me, but I don't bother to evade and instead focus on damage pressure and hopefully neutralizing Beacon C. To my surprise, I manage to retake it and see the Griffin is now moving back to re-engage me, so I retreat to cover, only to find that Beacon D has been taken again in my absence. My angle is bad, so I can't assist at D, so instead I turn my attention to a nearby Merlot Griffin and engage his flank, only to be quickly finished by the Tulumbus Griffin and the Golem's combined fire. Our team are now at a beacon and player disadvantage, with it being 5 versus 6 in the enemy's favour. I choose to bring out my Tulumbus Orkan Fujin due to the amount of explosive and missile weapons the enemy are using that my Ansar shield can counter, plus the ability to return damage from a reasonable distance with my Tulumbus, and burst damage with the Orkan if an enemy charges me. I approach Beacon D with a teammate and check for incoming missiles from the centre and note what looks to be a Tulumbus Rhino about to take Beacon C. The odds are stacking more and more against us at this stage, but the team's life bars are still close enough that it's not a complete loss yet. We are then engaged on by an enemy spiral user, so I bubble shield to block. A Thunder Leo sees our approach and moves into attack. I see the spiral bot is close enough to the corner of his cover to be engaged, and I drop him to critical health before trying to move close enough to the Leo to use my Orkan. but take enormous pressure from another spiral bot, so I'm forced to bubble to prevent any more damage. I manage to get a full salvo into the Lear, dropping him to critical health before the pressure becomes too much for me, and I fall. I decide the time for tactics is over, and instead brute force is the only way to turn this around. My Galahad comes into play, and my approach to Beacon C begins, keeping a lookout for incoming missiles to block. The Rhino I see is not worth the attention at this moment, so I look to focus on softer targets I can damage immediately. The Columbus Griffin from before is still there, so I charge him and take a full salvo, reducing me to nearly half health already. I arrive at a beacon and begin to reclaim it. Seeing the Hydra Fujin is nearby and exposed, I begin pressure on him, and then switch back to the Griffin, knowing that he's the biggest threat to me. He tries to retreat to cover, but gets stuck on the rock, so I'm able to complete the kill and claim back the beacon. We now outnumber the enemy, but I know we need to push hard and shut them down completely in order to secure a win. I move to assist at Beacon D, which has once again been captured by the enemy, but see an opportunity to re-engage the Hydra Fujin, so I take that instead. Then turning back to Beacon D to see the enemy there has been destroyed. I trust my team will reclaim the beacon, so I focus back on the Fujin, who has now retaliated against me, so I'm forced to block. The destroyed enemy respawns with a Columbus Griffin within my attack range, but he finishes me before I can do any significant damage. With only my Gecko Lear remaining, similar to the previous clip, my sole mission is to tank my way to Beacon B in a last-ditch attempt to win the game. Of all the enemies remaining, the Rhino is the only one who can stop me in my tracks, but he's too preoccupied with my teammate to notice me. I wait for his shield to come down before attacking, and he goes down from our combined fire. We've somehow managed to flip the team numbers heavily in our favor now at 5 versus 2. The Hydra Fujin goes down, leaving only the Columbus Griffin. I'm able to make it to Beacon B and claim it to begin the victory turnaround for the match. The last two enemies valiantly defend as much as they can, but our numbers and firepower are too strong and they eventually fall, but not before taking all of my bots with them in the process. Respect to them for the fighting spirit until the end. I end the game with 7 captures and 8 gold. I was unable to show it in this clip, but I find the Fujin to be an effective counter to the prolific amount of aphid users in the game currently. The inbuilt Ansal shield recharges very quickly, and it only takes a fraction of a charge to negate an entire aphid salvo, although this can be countered by the user by firing them one at a time. But so far, most of the aphid users opt not to do this. The next clip is a little different from my usual style of play. I decide I want to avoid direct combat as much as I can and focus on background fire support whilst being a dedicated beacon capturer. I had a surprising amount of fun doing this, and I feel it makes a refreshing and relaxing change from the stress of direct combat. I also demonstrate a little trick I've learned with the aphids to give yourself an advantage in their use. I feel the best robot for this task and map is the Stalker due to its speed and stealth ability, and the aphids best complement my idea for the indirect combat while still being able to output decent damage under the right conditions. I need to use my stealth sparingly as only an escape tool or for attack as a last resort, so I don't end up in a tricky situation without any escape chance. I make sure to move from wall to avoid taking missile pressure whilst checking the movements of the enemies. Where the enemies are located strongest, I want to avoid when possible. Seeing their heavier presence around A and B, I decide to move around to the other side of the map, towards D, and see if there is a chance of taking it. An enemy is waiting, so I need to engage from behind cover to help clear a path. My teammate finishes him, but another enemy moves in and prevents my advance for now. I take a significant amount of damage from the Norican rain, which forces me to use my stealth and move in closer to keep a presence near the beacon. The second enemy then reveals himself to only be an Orcan Cossack, so I try to engage when he's slowed down, but only manage to scratch him. However, my team pressure him behind cover, and I'm now able to move in on the beacon and steal it back. The enemies are quickly surrounding me, and my stealth is still on cooldown, so I have to tactically run away before making a heroic escape past an Orcan Galahad and back around to Beacon E, which has now been taken by a Plasma Gareth. To my great surprise, he doesn't notice me near him, and I liberate the beacon, making sure to stay behind cover in case he notices me and opens fire, as my stealth is on cooldown again. The enemy Gareth is attempting to capture beacon C, so I have to engage on him, but I only scratch him due to his high speed. However, my teammate finishes him off instead. My attention is now on the last remaining 2 beacons, and I see that they only have 1 guardian. My attack against him is ineffective, so I know it's a shielded enemy, and I guess it to be a rhino, so I don't approach. A nearby enemy at beacon D is at critical health, but at a bad angle for me to shoot him. So I use my teammate to boost me up so that my elevation is regarded as different by the game, causing the aphid to fire at a much steeper angle so that I can score a hit and destroy him. And although I was back down before I fired on my screen, due to latency, the game server would have still seen me as airborne when I fired, and so I got the steeper angle. I learnt of this technique by accident a while ago, and I try not to use it too often, as I think the developers would consider it an unintentional mechanical bug, but in this case, beacon protection was the larger priority. All the enemies except one are clustered in their spawn now, so I decide to move in on beacons A and B, but the predicted rhino is still guarding them, and there are no teammates in sight to help attack him. So I plan to get behind him with the intention of drawing him away and then using my stealth to flee and try to take the beacons. Plenty of enemy missiles are in flight, so I hug nearby walls just in case they were targeting me, as I need to save my stealth for my aforementioned plan. The incorrectly guessed rhino, which was actually a Thunder Regime, does exactly as I wanted him to and abandons his post to intercept me. I use my stealth and begin to back away, but a friendly orc and griffin joins me, and I'm emboldened to stay and assist him on the attack instead. The friendly griffin is left critical after the engagement, but I'm confident that he can take beacon B, so I move towards beacon A, trying to stay aware of any Hydra missiles that might be heading towards me. We hold the beacon advantage now, but we are still losing the match. I know we need to hold 4 beacons for at least 1 minute to push things back in our favour. I see an enemy close to attack range, and my greed gets the better of me, so I go for the attack, and I'm punished accordingly by a quick Vidyaz in the distance. It serves me right for being a naughty boy and breaking my rules. We had the strong advantage that we needed, but an enemy has now moved in on beacons A and B and quickly taken that advantage away. I futilely try to defend and prevent nothing. Seeing the enemy mostly gathered towards beacons A and B, I move in on beacon D, but my teammate has beaten me to it, and we now have a strong suppressing presence at their spawn area. I assist when I can, from behind cover, when a plasma griffin with bolts of steel jumps directly onto the beacon, but I'm able to prevent his capture as I take more Norican rain that cripples my movement speed. However, I like that we have them enclosed in their spawn, so I stick around to keep a presence, but then need to retreat a little as the pressure becomes too high. I don't run away completely, as I want to support my remaining teammate to help slow down the enemy counter-attack, as all of their team are now back at their spawn. After my teammate falls, I stick around to laboriously finish the Thunder Leo he left at critical health, as I'm the only one around to attack him at this point. Our team have now taken a reasonable advantage, but the enemy quickly regain the upper hand once again by securing the A and B beacons. As I assist my teammate, I notice beacon B being captured, so I activate stealth to safely check the opposition. A Punisher pattern is waiting for me, and even with my stealth activated, it's still possible for him to hit me with the spread of his weapons. So I stay out of his line of sight and engage him, but only scratching him. I know he's waiting for me to enter line of sight, so I bait him to stand still and engage me so I can land a much cleaner hit this time. I decide to move on, as does the pattern, but I'm halted by the approach of a fast-moving, unknown enemy, and I don't want to take my chances, so I retreat back towards beacon B, which is now undefended, hoping that the unknown enemy will take the long route around to get to me, giving me time to claim the beacon and escape. As I arrive at the beacon, I see the enemy did not take the long way, so I track him and activate stealth to prevent any lock-ons from behind. I claim the beacon, but I don't want him to reclaim it, so I stay close and engage the other enemies nearby. The enemy is identified as a Plasma Galahad, and he does manage to reclaim the beacon. He begins chasing me, and I run around hoping to lead him away so that I can retake the beacon once more. I activate stealth to prevent the other enemies from targeting me as I do this. Unfortunately, the Galahad doesn't take my bait, and surprise intercepts me. Knowing my stealth is about to end, I panic and run around the corner, take a wrong turn, and trap myself behind a fuel container. Knowing that my end is near, I attempt to make peace with the Galahad by embracing him close with a friendship hug. However, he doesn't accept my token of surrender and shoots off my leg instead. My Gareth comes in, and I'm set on making it to beacons A and B. But even though my team are now outnumbered, we managed to hold enough beacons to keep the enemy busy enough to eventually get the win. I only finished the game in 5th place with 5 beacon captures and reasonable damage. However, mention must go to the first place player on my team due to his great damage and also having 5 captures. Without him, I'm certain the game would not have been a win. When playing such a role, it's important to generally stay on the move from one beacon to another as much as you can. This helps to prevent the enemy from drawing a clear picture of where they can and can't move, and is also vital for when you're within range of enemy aphid users to help evade any unsuspecting fire. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've learned something useful. And as you all should know by now, I don't always play war robots. But when I do, I lead with a Gareth. And as you all should...